Hey guys, so I had a very strange experience last night, and I just wanted to record it and share it with you. Um, I'm not really even entirely sure what it means, but I just wanted to put it out there. And also, back on April 29th, I also had a very strange experience, and I will include that in this video as well because they're similar enough that they could possibly be related. So last night, actually more technically this morning at around something like 1:54 a.m. something around but anyway, I believe I had been recently woken up, maybe possibly just by one of our kids or by the cat or something, and I was going back to sleep. I believe I had possibly been awake, but I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, I was laying in my bed and I had my eyes closed, but while I was in this state, I was pondering and just asking lots of questions, lots of philosophical questions about things that have been going on, questions about things related to just the nature of reality and what's really true and what's going on. And so in the middle of having all of those thoughts and questions just kind of circulating through my mind, I can't really describe to you exactly what it was like experientially, except that imagine that you were completely awake and you were looking at a vivid scene in front of you, and it just felt very real. So like more so than like a dream feels real. It's like in a dream you kind of like wonder, is this real? Or like maybe you don't, like maybe afterward you reflect and it seems like not as coherent or something, but like this was definitely like, oh, like this is very vivid. Like if I wouldn't have shaken myself out of this experience and seen my room, I could have just thought that it was real. So anyway, I was closing my eyes and I just saw a very, very vivid image of a light, and it was a white light, and it just was kind of flickering brighter and darker, kind of like maybe it was passing behind clouds or something. Just a small light, maybe the same size as I don't know, maybe about the size of an airplane, or possibly a light on a helicopter. So pretty small, but it was just moving horizontally across the sky at about like this rate, and then it suddenly stopped, and when it stopped, it looked like it was turning or doing something so that I could see some dimensionality to it, but it turned and it suddenly became much brighter, and it was like so bright, it became so bright, and the shape of it wasn't completely circular. It was like one side was semi straight, and then it kind of came across the top, maybe a little bit curved, and then it kind of came out at an angle to one side, and then came off at the bottom. So almost like maybe like how it might look if you open a door and it looks like you're looking through a doorway, but maybe like the doorway is a little bit arched or something. So it's like you're opening the door and then the light's kind of like shining through at an angle. It looks something like that. But I didn't really distinguish any form of it other than that. But it was like, I'm telling you, like it went from just this experience of like there was just this light and it was like, oh, what's that, to suddenly it was like I had this like this feeling like, oh, like something's happening, and I felt like it was like directed at me. I felt like it was pointed at me somehow. I didn't understand what it meant, but it was like it opened, like the light like opened and got so bright. It still stayed fairly small, like um, obviously like much bigger than an airplane would be, but it was still fairly small. um, Let me see, it would be like mm, I don't know, it's hard to really describe. Maybe like a half inch, or between a quarter and a half inch tall, from what I could see, in relative measurements according to my, my view field. But as the light got like so bright and like was facing toward me, it had this very brilliant and very highly defined starburst pattern. And it's kind of hard to describe. It didn't look like just an ordinary, like you're looking at street lights, or the headlights coming at you at night. It wasn't like that. It was very, very defined, like very defined little sparks of light that were just coming out to the side. It was in a slightly elliptical form, but mostly round. So it was like just a little bit elliptical. And so all of these little spikes of white light were coming out from that. I guess I can call it a little doorway of light, whatever that light was. That starburst was there when it got to the highest point of its brilliance. And at that moment when that happened, it was like at first when the light had stopped and it started to get brighter, almost like maybe if you see a planet in the sky like Venus or something, it looks brighter than a normal star. And so at first it was kind of like, oh, like what's that? Like it caught my attention, but then it like continued to take that dimensionality and then to get brighter and then to have that starburst. And it was like at that point, it was like I felt like all of the energy in my body change. It was like, and I don't really know how to describe it other than when you are just maybe sitting or laying down, you have a sense of like the presence of your body, and it feels maybe like a certain density. I don't know if I can really describe it that way, but you feel like you have a certain weight or bulk or substance to you. But all I can say is that within like just a snap of time, that feeling of my substance was cut by at least 10. It like was just like smack, like all of a sudden I felt like I was just like so light. Like I just and it's not like, how can I really describe it? It's not that I felt like my physical weight was changing, like that I was levitating or something. It's not like that. It was like it was a totally energetic feeling. It was like inside my normal feeling of my sort of normal energy around me. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that feeling suddenly was like it was like all like it felt like I was like trying to find words for this. It's like it was almost like all my insides were taken out, or like it's like I suddenly felt like not necessarily hollow, just like very sparse. Like my energy felt like it was spread, or like it was just lighter. It was less dense somehow, and it was this feeling of just all of a sudden. It was just all of a sudden, and when that happened, that feeling, like the combination of the light and then the feeling, just got me into the state of like, and then I snapped out of it, and I like kind of shook my head and like looked, and it was like, okay, like I'm seeing my bedroom, and so but it was interesting because when I like I shook out of it and I was like looking and I was like seeing that I was in my bedroom, but when I closed my eyes again, it was so weird. I'm telling you, this is so weird. I closed my eyes, and you know how you can have an after image of something, like when something's very bright or very dark against a contrasting background, you can look at it and then close your eyes, and it's almost like you can see it when your eyes are closed. Well, I had that same experience of an after image of that starburst pattern. It was like I closed my eyes and then it was like I saw it like just very, very vibrantly. It was kind of like a bluish green color. And it was like, it looked like there was some really bright light that had just shown in my eyes in that pattern that I had just experienced. And it was so weird. Like, I've never had that sort of a thing happen to me before. So anyway, that was my first experience that I wanted to share. Again, I'm not really sure exactly what it means, but I just wanted to say, like, it was like so bizarre because it was like, oh man, like, especially when I was like closing my eyes and I was still seeing the after image of it. It was like, it like felt, it didn't feel like I was just dreaming. It felt different. It felt more like there was an experience of something. So I'm not sure how to explain that. But anyway, I want to tie this into something else that happened on April 29th, 2020 this year. And again, you can tell that in our house, we tend to be very philosophical and theological. So at the time when this happened, my husband and I were kind of talking about something philosophical or theological. I don't really remember what it was, but it was something that was like, we're talking about like the deeper meaning of life or something. I don't know. So, something that we were talking about was more on the level of like, oh, this is significant. We're like, figuring things out. But so I was talking with my husband in the living room, and it was, I recorded the time. It was 8:55 p.m. So it was dark outside, purely dark outside, evening. And as I was talking with my husband, he was sitting kind of on the couch next to me, and I was sitting in a rocking chair, like a lazy boy rocking chair. And I have big sets of windows that I was looking out, and they are facing west. So my windows are facing west. And I'm living in Southern California near the foot of some mountains, and to the west of me, that direction goes toward Pasadena, LA County, that general direction. So I was sitting talking with my husband, and suddenly something caught my attention. And again, kind of like this experience I had in the nighttime, just this morning. It was a very, very small light, and it looked like it was, again, it was moving across the sky, kind of like at this speed, like this, and it looked like it was kind of like flickering, like a little bit in and out. Like, I guess the only way I can explain it is like, it looks like if there's a light that's behind clouds, that it can like get brighter and darker as it moves across. And so it was moving like this, very fast, like much faster than an air, like an airplane, you'd see it, a little dot, it would just barely move, and even a helicopter, coming by is like, just be kind of slow, but this light was like, so it was very fast. And it was very steady. It moved exactly in a horizontal line, and then it came to a complete stop with very little to no acceleration or deceleration. Just like that. And it caught my attention because at first I was like, oh, that looks like a shooting star or something, because it just kind of faded into being a brighter light, kind of like if you see a shooting star, it kind of starts without really being able to see it, but then it kind of gradually gets a little bit brighter as it kind of, as the meteor gets hot, it starts to glow. So it was like, oh, like that might be a shooting star, because it was going about the same speed as you might expect a shooting star. But it became very apparent that it was not like going down, it was going straight across. And so I was like, oh, that's weird. And so it caught my attention. It was flickering. It was a white light. It was moving like completely horizontal, but the light was brighter and darker, brighter and darker. And then it immediately stopped, and it began to get bright, and it began to glow, and it looked like about the size of maybe just a little bit bigger, and it was kind of bright. And that's when it really caught my attention, because I was like, what in the world? Like, that's not what an airplane or a helicopter or even a drone or something, like nothing like that I know of, any technology would be doing this right now. So it was kind of confusing. And then suddenly it started to get dimmer again, and it started to immediately go in the opposite direction. Again, horizontal, about the same speed. It started to fade, dimmer and brighter, just the way that it did before. And somewhere around halfway of the length of the trajectory that it was traveling, which wasn't like that big, it was probably like, like this, like in the sky. It wasn't like, like from my perspective, like maybe like 4 inches max, like across the sky. And it, about halfway through its trajectory, began to change to red. And so the light became red, and then it came over to about where I had first started seeing it, and it stopped immediately, and it became brighter. And this time it was red. This time it wasn't as big of a light as the first time, so it was maybe a little bit smaller than what you might expect Venus to look like, but it was still like very, very pointed, and it was very bright, just a bright red dot in the sky. And then after just a moment, it just decided, like, it was like it just decided to go like down. It just like went down, and it didn't go straight down. It like went to the side, so like it was stopped like this, and then just kind of, so it was just and where I was seeing it, we're actually across from a school, so I had the roof line of the school to compare to. So it was going completely horizontal, and then it went diagonal, and it went out of sight. So it went kind of behind the mountains that were over there. So it must have been kind of far away, because it looked like it didn't just disappear behind the school, and like the roof of the school. It disappeared behind the mountain. So yeah, so that says something in terms of how fast it was going. It must have been going super fast. But anyway, then that was it, and it was just like, what in the world was that? And the strange thing about all of that is, so my husband was sitting right next to me, and as soon as it caught my attention, and especially when it like came to the point where it like got really bright, like a bright light, I was like, Josh, like, get over here, look, like, look in the sky. And you have to understand, it was kind of like an overcast day, so you couldn't even see like any clouds, or I mean, you couldn't see the clouds. It was so dark. You couldn't really see any stars. You couldn't really even see really anything. So the sky was just a completely blank black canvas. And my husband came right over to where I was, and he looked out the window, and he was like, I don't see anything. I don't see it. And I'm like, look, like, you can't see that? Like, look, it's right there. And he's like, where? I'm like, it's like from our perspective, it's like an inch above the school. It's just right in the clear open. Like, just look straight out the window, you're gonna see it. It's like there's not that many places to look, And he was just like looking, and he's like, I don't see it. And so he like ran outside real quick, and he was like looking, he was like trying to like get another perspective, and he just couldn't see it. He just didn't see it the whole time. And I was just like, what? Why can't you see it? But anyway, then it was gone. It was so that whole experience lasted maybe like 15 seconds, and then it was just done. So it was not very long at all. But afterward, I was just asking God about it, and I was like, so what is that? Like, because I was raised in the West, and so I always heard about, those weird people out in California, those people out near the coast, they have these weird experiences. And And so I'm like, oh, so what is that? Like, is that, like there's so many thoughts going through my mind. I'm like, what in the world is this? Like, so in a sense, I was like asking, like, okay, I was like, okay, God, like, is this real? And what I meant by real, like, I think what I meant was, like, is this just like I'm just mistaking this like for some sort of a airplane or something, a drone or something. And I'm telling you guys, like when it came and it stopped, it like immediately stopped. It did not even have any bounce or it didn't have any wobbling or like, slowing down for an acceleration. Nothing like what you would imagine for like a real aircraft that we know about. And so it just came and it just stopped, and then it turned around and it just stopped, and then it was very abnormal sort of motion. So I was just like asking God, like, so is this real? And it seemed like, sometimes those questions are kind of hard to discern, but it seemed like I had the feeling like, well, yeah, like it's real. Yeah, it's real. But I'm not even really sure exactly what that means. So I was like trying to like have maybe like follow-up questions, or like to just kind of like sort through like, so what does this mean? What is this? And I wasn't really getting very many clear answers or impressions. And so I actually told my son about it, and he's a pretty intuitive guy, and so he prayed about it. He said that he felt like God told him that it was a test. So, so I'm not sure what that means, guys. If you have any thoughts, or if anything like this has ever happened to you, please leave your thoughts, leave your comments, and I'd love to hear what you think.